All right. Hey, everyone. It's Debbie Potts, and I'm with my friend Stephanie Holbrook from Keto Endurance, and we're going to talk triathlons and low carb athletes and how you really can perform your best without overdosing with carbohydrates and that they're not always bad, too. So, Stephanie,
Right.
coming on.
That's an important message. Yes.
It is, because I think that's the whole message, is that all carbs aren't bad. And I think what, we talk about all the time in the keto world, it's for people that are not athletes typically, and really how to talk on this show, as well as your podcast, Keto Endurance, is talking about that timing of carbohydrates. But first, kind of talk about what you have been up to, since we haven't had you on the show since last year, since all this has happened. So talk about, kind of catch us up to date on your world and keto endurance.
Hello, Debbie. As you know, I did the half Ironman, Arizona 70.3. And I had done the rim to rim, hike rim to rim, the Grand Canyon just a couple weeks earlier. And I really thought that they were going to cancel the half Ironman. So I had really stopped focused training on it a long time ago. I had stopped going to master swim because I'm like, they're not going to have the race. I still swam once a week at the lake just because out of routine habit. I have friends
Mondays, right?
there. Mondays at 4 p.m. I swim. If you live in Phoenix, you can meet us at 4 p.m. on Monday at Lake Pleasant. We swim at First Wave Tri, and other tri groups can also join us. And then I did long, group bike rides, but we didn't do anything longer. We only did a few hours, like 40 miles. I didn't do any like 50 or 60 mile rides. Mm-hmm. And the runs were all hikes. I did because I was hiking for rim to rim. So it was just a bunch of hilly hikes.
But you did a lot of stair climbing, though. Those pictures of those stairs look like
yes. Every Tuesday morning, we climb stairs.
Where is that in Phoenix?
It's in Verrado, which is in the east or West Valley. It's way West Valley, like in Buckeye. Verrado is off the I-10 and Verrado Way. It's just straight. If you live in Phoenix and you go on Verrado, take the Verrado exit, and you just keep going straight, the stairs are at the end of the road.
Wow.
You can't mix it. And I believe it's a quarter mile straight up and then down. And we did 4 to 6 times every Tuesday. It was a big help, although looking back from the Grand Canyon, something that I would have trained with my pack. So we didn't train with our packs on the stairs.
With weights.
And that seemed to make a big difference. But I don't know, after 20 something miles, and the last mile and a half are going to be hard anyway. It's super steep.
Rim to rim, because it's always something I want to do, but it's 7 miles down, 7 miles across, 7 up, right?
Yeah. About that, yeah.
And so,
I mean, my Garmin wasn't reading right, but it's like 23 and a half miles or something like that.
Yeah, I don't know. People do back to back days.
Rim to rim.
But so, how much weight was in your backpack?
Probably, maybe 10 pounds. Not a lot. It wasn't. I mean, we did it in one day, so we didn't have to have sleeping bags or anything. There's tons of water on the course, which is nice. There, during the parts of the year, some parts of the year, the water's frozen and you can't get it out of the spigot. But when we went, there was water, plenty of water. And at the bottom, you can get lemonade. They have a little store at Phantom Ranch. And I got 2 glasses of lemonade, and it was fine. I did it just fine. It's just the last mile and a half was really hard. But I don't know, it's probably hard for everybody.
Yeah, it's uphill, 7 miles.
It's super steep. My son was our driver. He dropped us off at the North Rim and then met us on the South Rim. So about 3 miles left, my cell phone worked, and I called him and I said, hey, we had 3 miles left, but just to tell you, it's like 2 hours. And well, the 3 to 1.5 wasn't really that bad. I mean, it's still up, but the 1.5 to the finish is ridiculous. It's like the stairs that we would do. It's really steep. So it took us about, I would say, 2 hours to do the last mile and a half.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's good.
It took about an hour, probably not even an hour from 3 to 1.5, but 1.5 to the finish, to
So
Bright Angel.
you were training though, you've been active, biking, and with
Yeah.
COVID times, people in Arizona, you guys, I remember from the beginning, were still swimming and you're biking with friends and
Right.
keeping active, but not doing the longer stuff. So being, the coach for keto endurance athletes, how do you apply your knowledge to your own training, and how do you fuel for events? Is that keeping low carb? Are you doing strict keto? I know you're a big carnivore person. Kind of, how's your nutritional intake for
Well,
yourself for performance?
I know there's a lot of carnivore people who don't believe in adding carbs ever, but I still add carbs, and I use Vespa amino acid peptide.
Mhm.
And I don't use a lot of carbs during training, but I'll still add some, you know, sports drink with electrolytes, or like Gatorade or something like that. Not a ton. For races, I use Perpetuum a lot. I also have UCAN. So I've used UCAN in training, and but I really, like, for this race, Ironman Arizona, because I didn't feel like I would train for it. I'm like, I want to go with stuff I know I've used in racing and that's been really worked well for me. So I used my Perpetuum, but I did not realize that my Perpetuum was expired,
Well,
because
you
I
haven't
don't.
raced for 10 years, right? Since you've last done a half Ironman or something.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't done a half Ironman since 2009, but I've done a lot of bike races.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I was just focused on cycling.
But that's a different fuel. Do you fuel differently for a bike race, or your heart rate's probably higher than an Ironman that you're
Well, not for a
half
century
Ironman?
bike ride. Century bike ride, you're
Oh,
going to
century
use, your
bike
heart
rides,
rate's
not
not
doing
going to be
like a
that.
crit, or to me, bike
No.
racing sounds like, crit races or all out
Yeah,
time
well,
trials.
I have done some crits and stuff. And generally, I do, I warm up for a crit, and then I'll use some, a little bit of faster acting fuel. Still use Vespa amino acid peptide, and then I'll use some, not, use Cliff Blocks a lot, because I like how I can dose them. Like, if you use a gel or something, once you open it, if you use like I'm only going to use a third of the gel, but then you have 2/3 of a pack, and it just is, goo.
Mm-hmm. So you're
It is
training,
goo and goo, but I use Cliff Blocks for short, intense races.
distance. So your heart rate's higher. So do you change your fueling based on your performance or event you're doing? If it's a higher heart rate, they're burning more carbohydrates, or are you trying to do like low heart rate maffetone type of training and racing? So you're burning fat like a half Ironman.
Right. I do a lot of math training, but for longer races, I try to use, well, I was using Perpetuum because it has protein in it and it digests better. But during the half Ironman, I drank my Perpetuum, and I was like, this tastes like soap. And I was like,
Not good to drink soap. You won't drink it.
no, I did not drink it. And then purposely, I brought bottles that I could just throw away. So I threw out bottles, and I drank the Gatorade that they had in the course, which it's pretty sugary, and it was a little, it aggravated my asthma a little bit. So I had a lot of phlegm, but I think it was too sweet. But when I got home, I realized my Perpetuum expired in 2018.
That's not too bad.
No, not too bad.
I
was like, oh, wait. Oh, wow. But, it's because I use so few carbs. I bought the big container, and I don't use a lot of carbs in training, and I didn't do a lot of long training sessions because I didn't think they were going to have the race. I mean, literally, we got an email a couple weeks ago before the race saying, hey, the race is going on. I mean, they never told us it was going to be canceled. So it's not like Ironman's fault that I was not prepared. I will say there was not a lot of, like, literally half the bike racks it wasn't a full set of people.
Really?
And yeah.
It wasn't a sold out race.
No. no, you could have gotten in if you wanted to.
Next year. So with doing endurance events, I know we've talked a lot in the past, but your focus is to help people be aware and educate them N equals 1, how many carbohydrates they need or don't need in their training, and then figure out how to race with what fuel they should use to keep burning fat and not bonk and have that up and down blood sugar roller coaster. So talk about what your periodization training plan, working with clients to train for an event as a half Ironman or rim to rim or a marathon.
I think, for any athlete during their base period of training, which is anywhere from, a couple weeks to a couple months between, depending on the person, is going to be full keto and maffetone training. And with a few, I still add a few intervals in, but nothing more than 5 minutes during a training session total, and not longer than 30 seconds per interval. So it's not, short intervals, but not ridiculous amounts that they can't recover from. And I think that just keeps a little spice in the training, but not, because people get bored with maffetone all the time. And it's, so you add a little intervals to add a little spice, but then just say, like, this is a full keto time. We're going to do, you can use amino acids or ketone salts or ketone esters for training, but try to keep all the carbs out of training. And then depending on the person, when you get to the build phase of training, and this is where the part of training that's going to look like your race course. This is the part that I did do for the rim to rim training. I did not do for Arizona. So you want to try fueling the way you're going to race. And this is, if you are a person who responds poorly to carbohydrates, there are a lot of people who just don't respond well to carbohydrates, then you're going to practice fueling with ketone salts, esters, amino acid peptides, and maybe a protein drink or protein, or even like real food, depending on what you're racing. I've done a century bike ride using meat sticks because I was doing the carnivore study. So I just used, meat during my training. But then,
how'd that go?
It went fine. I did the Phil's Cookie Fondo. I guess it wasn't a century, but the Phil's Cookie Fondo, which is that was literally the steepest and hardest bike event I've ever done.
Can you chew on a meat stick while you're riding though? I can't imagine trying to chew.
Yeah, you can. Yeah, I ate meat sticks while I was riding. I just had them in a plastic baggie.
Yeah, just thinking chewing it properly and digest it, that it'd just be sitting there.
No, it was fine. I didn't have a problem with it. It was, I had a problem with the course because it was so freaking hard, but it was miserable.
So
I had a guy literally.
Yeah, go ahead.
In front of me. It was so steep. He couldn't unclip in time and he just fell over.
That was almost me this summer when hill. Yeah, that's the hard thing is if it's on a hill that's too steep, you can't get off your bike and, or rest for a minute, get off your bike, get back on either, because you can't start pedaling. You have to go back down and start over. So I want to go back to what you're saying. So base training, you have different periods of training blocks, and you want, as you said, the first phase is your base training and you're doing keto. Does that just mean low carb? Are you measuring ketones to be in nutrition?
Well, I think here's the problem with measuring ketones. If you're a keto adapted athlete, you're never going to have really high ketones, just period. Yeah. Because your body gets really good at using them. So if you're using a blood ketone meter, they're just really not going to show up. So, I mean, you'll get like 0.5 or 0.8 or even maybe 1, but you're not going to have like 1.5 or 2, or you see those people with 3 millimolar of ketones. And a lot of the strength athletes can do that. But if you're an endurance athlete, you're not ever going to see really high ketones. And your blood sugar is never going to read super low either, because your body gets really good at gluconeogenesis. And even if I've done fasted bike rides and been full, eating a ketogenic diet, and my blood sugar is still like 100. So you're not going to see like 80s or 70s like some people see. And I think that's a big concerning thing for people who want to see the data. I'm like, I want to know I'm burning fat. How you know you're burning fat, if you can ride a couple hours in zone 2, or run or whatever, anything in zone 1, 2 for 2 or more hours, and you feel good, you're probably well keto adapted. It's just like, if you feel like you're going to bonk, if you're like, I rode for an hour and I'm going to bonk, or you have any times you feel like you're going to bonk, that's probably a problem with fat adaptation, or you're not using enough electrolytes. I have clients who have a huge problem. You need more electrolytes as a keto adapted athlete. And there are some carnivore people who are like, I don't believe in electrolytes. Those are not athletes. So if you are an athlete and you feel, if you're following the macros of a low carb or keto athlete, and you feel like you're going to bonk, that's either you don't have a big enough base or you don't have enough electrolytes.
So usually
it's one of
people
those
don't
two
need
things.
fuel. It's just electrolytes that they need, not a Cliff Bar.
Right. Yes.
So are you saying it's more being fat adapted? Is that the same thing to you as being keto adapted? Is fat adapted?
Fat adapted, keto adapted. I mean, to me, that means the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not, I mean, everybody has their own definition. And I've read other, keto coaches or fat adapted coaches or people who promote metabolic flexibility, they all say similar things, like you're trying to train your body to burn fat as its primary source of fuel. And then you add add carbohydrates as needed or desired. Mm-hmm. So I think you know this, but maybe your listeners don't. There's a lot of keto people are like, you don't ever need to have you don't even ever need to add in the carbs. But when your body's making all energy comes from making ATP. Mm-hmm. So, and you get a lot of ATP, I think it's 124, I don't know what the units is, but of ATP from fat. You get ATP from beta hydroxybutyrate, which is ketones. Mm-hmm. And then you also make ATP from carbohydrates. So even though if you were a carbohydrate dependent athlete and you stop that and you become a fat adapted, keto adapted athlete, you may be faster, like because you weren't able to efficiently tap into your fat stores. So you may be faster and you may think, well, I don't want to add in carbs because I was slower as a carb dependent athlete. Now I'm faster. But if you become well keto adapted and then you add in the carbs, you're able to make that much more ATP. So, but some people become insulin resistant very easily. I mean, genetics, lifestyle, lots of factors. Mm-hmm. So it may be just a teeny tiny carbs that you need to add to get that boost in performance. And maybe you don't care. You're like, I don't want to be on the podium. I don't care about that. And that's fine. And you don't ever have to add in the carbs. Like some athletes never want to add in the carbs, and that's okay. You don't ever have to, but just know you will, if you're a fat adapted, keto adapted athlete and you add in carbohydrates, it will boost your performance with the caveat you're insulin sensitive. If you're not insulin sensitive, the carbs won't do you any good. But if you are, they'll give you a performance boost.
So it's like that answers your question. Yeah, it's like your rocket fuel when you are fat adapted and you have that metabolic flexibility. So you're able to be burning fat, then have some carbs. You can add that fuel to you and you'll still flip back to fat burning. You're not stuck in carbohydrate burning, sugar burning. Because I think a lot of times is why, we need to keep these podcasts up, because the information out there for keto and low carb are for people that are not doing necessarily 10, 20 hours of endurance training a week. So it's really different story for people to go follow someone that's doing a nutritional ketosis and having 20 grams a day of carbohydrates, and they're fearful of adding 50 or 100 grams. For some people, and not understand that they can still be burning fat, and you're not going to kill yourself off, and that your performance.
It's not going to make you, people are afraid of adding the carbs and think like, oh my gosh, I added in carbs and now it quote unquote knocks me out of keto. Well, your body's going to be quote unquote knocked out of keto anyway if you train hard enough and you have gluconeogenesis going on, where your body's making its own protein, using it as fuel, and your liver, your body will make sure carbohydrates and even store it in your liver. Even if you never ate a single carbohydrate, it will do that. So your body will kick you out of ketosis by itself without even adding carbs. But then I wanted to add too that as I'm a person who has always had a hard time losing weight, even as a child, and I'm always trying to quote unquote lose, like I want to lose more body fat. And a big problem I've had personally and with other people is just not eating enough fuel for endurance training. And it's really wreaked havoc on my hormones, and learning to eat more to produce hormones and recover. And I feel better. And actually I start to lose fat by eating more protein and fat. And having enough fuel. So I think that that's something that a lot of endurance athletes who've had a weight problem conceptualize, is like, instead of like, well, I just worked out this long, I'm not hungry. You're always told like, don't eat if you're not hungry. I'm not hungry. Then you don't eat enough fuel to recover. And then the next training session, you don't have as much energy, and you may not be hungry in that moment, but if you don't have enough fuel, eventually you will be hungry, and you won't be able to stop eating. I've seen that in myself and other people, and then you just don't bounce back and become more and more tired, and then don't recover. It's this domino effect. So just to make sure that you get enough fuel, I use the Chronometer app. And you can put in your information. If you're training for a half Ironman or Ironman, you're an active person. So I sometimes think like, people say like, well, I'm not really that active. I go and train for a couple hours a day, but then I sit at a desk the rest of the day. If you're training, 2 hours or more than 3 days a week, you're probably an active person. And that's a good indicator, and it syncs with a Garmin or Polar or whatever to make sure that you are getting enough fuel.
The Chronometer syncs to your Garmin? Oh.
Yeah. Well,
what is the information
Garmin syncs to Chronometer.
But what is
Chronometer doesn't sync to Garmin.
Oh. But
so you can pull in data from Garmin to Chronometer.
But Chronometer I thought was just adding your food log.
It is, but then it takes into account your training too, and it'll add how much you need to add for food. And you'll be surprised of how much, well, some people may not be surprised. I was surprised how much I really needed to eat during training days to be able to recover, because literally it's double the food. But miraculously, if I eat what it tells me to eat, the next day I'll be lighter and feel better. And if I don't eat what it tells me, if I eat like, oh, I'm not really hungry, I'm just not going to eat. I ate like, 1,500 calories and I did a 4-hour bike ride. I'm like, but I'm not hungry, so I'm just not going to eat. I will literally be heavier the next day. And I think it's just, inflammation, and my body doesn't have the tools to recover.
Yeah. But I think a lot of that is mentality for a female athlete that it's good to talk about too, right? We're always trying to lose weight. We're always trying to look better. It's always this constant thing. And I think a lot of people work out, the why is to look good and they feel better, but they like the results when you train. And you combine that with low carb keto world, and you combine that with fasting. And I think you can really dig yourself into a hole, because we start to do too much, and people have that type A, AAA personality. They think more is better, and I should do fasted workouts. Well, let's, realize I start burning fat, I'm not hungry. So let's see, I can fast even longer, even though I just went biking and then I just went swimming and I still haven't eaten. I'm awesome. I'm a rock star. And then people start bragging about it and think, that's the right thing to do. And then other people read that social media, go, oh, that's what I'm supposed to do too. No one's ever stopping realizing, is this causing another source of chronic stress on my body that's impeding my ability to improve and reach peak performance gains? Or is it, something that I should do because other people are doing it and just forget about how I feel because that worked for somebody else?
Exactly. Yes, I agree. And I think, from my personal experience in working with clients, I don't think if you're training for a big event, maybe during base building, it's okay to do 24-hour fasting if you have a lot of rest in there. Mm-hmm. But I don't recommend anything longer than an 18-hour fast for anybody who's doing training for a big event, for an endurance event. Mm-hmm. And 18 hours, that still means you need to get all your fuel in that 6 hours, which can be hard. Mm-hmm. If you have a big block of training and you have you do, intervals plus, 30 minutes to an hour, and then you don't eat until on Fridays, I do miracle intervals where you do intervals and then we do a sort of an easy spin afterwards. And if I'm planning a fast and I'm not supposed to eat until 1 o'clock, then how much those intervals plus fast equals stress. And then finally you're going to get fuel and you need so many calories of fuel. That's a lot of fuel to try to get in a short window of time. So really think about that. Instead of thinking about, I'm just trying to burn fat, I think for me personally to realize how much more I need to eat, I think I'm trying to eat to recover and to perform. Mm-hmm. And I think for me, in my headspace, that works a lot better. Yeah. And for someone who has chronic low hormones, I have to eat to make hormones. Because if I eat more, I have a better hormone profile. I mean, I've seen it in blood tests, so it's not a guess. I know for sure it's true.
Yeah. But that's why I think lab testing is so good to do. Say, what I'm doing now, is it improving my performance, but is it helping me in the aging process? Is it impacting my longevity? And that's what I've been kind of focused on trying to educate people, is what you're doing now causing you breakdown and burnout in the future and totally wreaking havoc on your metabolism, your cells, your mitochondria, your gut dysfunction. I mean, all this stuff that with the chronic cardio and excessive training and racing that I think a lot of people started to do with COVID because they didn't know what else to do. Athletes, other people sit around and watch 12 hours of TV. Other people are athletes. They're going to start going for these, 10-mile runs every day and biking. Yeah. So it's all right, it's a Goldilocks effect for everything. How much is what amount of whatever you do is going to give that optimal benefit and give you long-term benefits and not just the short term going, okay, give me more. So you have to find what's the right amount for everybody, because everyone is so different. But
I agree. And I think I really like your point that you made about don't look at what somebody else is doing and then their pretty picture on Instagram, oh, they look fabulous and they're doing this. Mm-hmm. I should do exactly what they do. Yeah. Because you're in a different place. Everybody is pretty individualized and we're in a different place. And if you have to really, listen to your body. And if you're not able to listen to your body, get help. Yeah. Find out, get a coach, do some analysis to find out what the little tweaks are.
Yeah. And I think that's a thing. It's such an N=1, especially fueling and training as a low carb athlete and performing at this. You have to make those adjustments. Like you said, the one part of the training phase is fuel for your training as you would on race day and practice that. But it's everyone's routine and timing of when to take that fuel and drinking is going to be different. And you know, figuring out what works for you isn't an exact plan, but maybe it's a template you start with and then make those little adjustments up or
Right.
down afterwards or as you
I
go and
think,
experience.
yeah, I agree. And using, people are like, well, what should I use on, this is like something that makes me a little bit crazy when people are like, what should I do on race day? I'm like, what did you do
Yeah.
when you're training?
Yeah.
Because you shouldn't do anything new on race day.
Mm-hmm.
You should already know what you're going to fuel with on race day because you tried it out many, many times
Mm-hmm.
during the build phase of training, because your training should look like your race. If you have a hilly race, you should be riding hills. If you have a flat race, you should be riding flat areas, and you should be testing out what fuel works best, because you will likely have different fuel for a flat race than a hilly race. You know, especially I work with athletes, and we work on a combination of, you know, fuels that help people with burning, with fat burning, which is ketone salts, ketone esters, and amino acids, amino acid peptides. And then slow acting fuels, which would be like a UCAN or a Perpetuum or something like that. And then fast acting fuels, which is like a goo gel, Cliff Blocks. And during a hilly race, sometimes you want to time those Cliff Blocks or those fast acting fuels right before you get to the hill. So you don't give your body time to adjust. It gives you a little rocket fuel. And so it's a combination, but that some athletes, the amount of the Cliff Blocks or the fast acting fuel is going to be different for some people than other people. So if you have I had a guy who was trying to get the belt buckle for Leadville, and I said, you know, he's figuring out the slow and fast acting fuel, and he used Infinite Nutrition. That's a custom nutrition
Yeah, I used
thing
to use
that
that.
they do a little formula on that. But then he still used the goos and gels for some harder parts, and he got his belt buckle, and he had said that his power, because we didn't work together that long, because he was already a lean athlete, very fit. He just needed a couple tweaks of his nutrition. And one of the big things was, you need to do a fasted bike ride, like at least once a week, just to maintain that insulin sensitivity. And that was really hard for him. But once he did that, the fuel just worked so much better. And his power went up, I think it was 3%, which is pretty huge when it comes to power in a short period of time to get a 3% boost in power. And he was able to get what he wanted to do. He wanted to get that belt buckle, and he did. But you just have to figure out where you're at. So somebody who, he was naturally a lean guy, so his body was, good at burning fuel already. But someone who's overweight and has problems with insulin resistant naturally, could be just your genes, that you're not going to get over that. You're not going to change. With epigenetics, you can turn on and off genes, but you're not going to change like every structure of your body. So maybe I've worked with athletes that the amount of fuel they use is just, for a century bike ride, 4 Cliff Blocks, not even a whole package of Cliff Blocks, but that little tiny bit of carbohydrate was enough for them. And if they went over that, it would have made them sluggish. So that's, a different.
Can you go back to the ketones? I think a lot of people always have questions about the ketone peptides and the different ones and what that does for you. If you take them before you work out or during your workout, and what's the purpose?
You can use the difference between ketone salts and ketone ketone salts have minerals in them, ketone esters don't. They don't have any extra minerals, so they're more of a salt. That's why they're called salts. So
So you take them before.
So you would take them
during?
beforehand, and then about a dose every 2 hours. Okay. So it's and then amino acids or amino acid peptide, there's different ones out there. Some people use BCAAs, which I personally cannot take BCAAs because they make me gag, but some people don't have that reaction. But Or
It's
there's
hard. The capsules, I know I like the Kion aminos, but they're very chalky, so I can't, I like the Hammer Nutrition has the capsules of supplements. I used to take every hour the aminos they
yeah, and
have.
I use a Vespa because it's amino acid peptide, but it's
Mhm.
similar to amino acid. And I take it every 2 hours. But I think, the amino acids, there's different. I know Ben Greenfield has like a amino acid protocol
Mhm.
that he recommends, and you can, look that up. I think Debbie can put that in the show notes. But they have, it's just whatever fits you and what you can I mean, a huge thing with racing is what can you stand the taste of?
Yeah, I know. Nothing's the same, especially if it's hot weather out. It's like
Yeah,
nothing
so
tastes good.
we use, what do we use? Keto Force, the Keto Force something
Mhm.
something. So I use that. I'll go over the fuel that I use usually for racing. I'm not going to use Arizona as an example because that was sort of, so, but like my last Century bike ride, I had amino. I had 2 water bottles, and I can make it through a Century in 3 water bottles. I know.
So it depends how hot it is, though, because this summer I was riding long
Yeah, well,
distance
that's
and I
true.
was
Well, I'm
90
talking about
degrees
Tour de
out.
Tucson. So Tour de Tucson, I did, I think, well, maybe I did 4 water bottle because I stopped at the very second to last stop. I hate stopping at aid stations.
Yeah.
I've done races where I've rode with other people who want to stop at every other aid station. I'm like, I'm not riding with that person again
So you mean
because,
like the group organized rides that not
yes,
races? Yeah.
yeah. So this is a group ride. Yeah.
Mhm.
I mean, it's different for, road races that are a race, even though they do have stops. So a road race is going to be, it's not going to be 100 miles for women. It's going to be about 50 or 60. So if you're doing a USA cycling road race, it's, obviously shorter than that. But I would be, I have about 2 water bottles. I would have Perpetuum with whenever non-expired Perpetuum. And then 2 tablespoons of the Keto Force.
I haven't tried the
Force.
the ketones yet. I have the
Yeah,
Vespa, but
they
not
have a
that.
keto. So the same brand has one, a different thing that sounds similar. That's just coconut oil or coconut MCT oil.
Yep.
That's not what I'm referring to. So if I get the name wrong, I apologize. It's just in the silver can
I'll
and
look
it's in
them
my
up.
refrigerator.
Okay, we'll put them in the show notes when we know
Okay,
for
I'll
sure.
look it up before, so you can look in the show notes and make sure that you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
So I'll have Perpetuum and 1 tablespoon or 2 tablespoons, depending on how I'm feeling, of that in each water bottle. And then I do a Vespa before I start, about 20 minutes before I start, and then every 2 hours. And then I have 1 package of clip blocks in my bento box. And if I'm feeling like I want to dig a little deeper, I will eat a clip block.
That's if your heart rate's going above your aerobic fat burning ranges.
Right.
So when you're doing kind of pushing it towards finish.
Right.
Yeah.
Or a hill or something like that. So if it's like a hilly area, I'll do a cliff block. And that's pretty much it. The nice thing is, that may sound like a lot of fuel, but it's not really, it's not, I don't have to stop for anything else, except for if I run out of water and I'll have to stop, at the last aid station. And I usually carry some more in a bag, Perpetuum, to refill. And I don't add any other ketone.
That's in an event. You wouldn't do that in a race, would you?
In an event.
I'm not going to.
Well, if you're doing a time, yeah. I wouldn't do that in a race. That's an event. But for Tour de Tucson, because people are trying to get platinum, then that's a different story.
Does that mean they're starting to get certain time in Tour de Tucson?
Right, they're trying to get a time.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And so those folks, I am not, for people who don't know me, I followed the traditional high carbohydrate, low fat diet recommended to endurance athletes. And I was racing and everything, and my health continued to decline. And I got fatter. And then I realized later that it was my hormones. So I didn't do races. I went on this journey to figure out like what the heck is going on with me. And then I found Ben Greenfield and Paul CHEK and realized, oh, I'm doing some things wrong. And then I finally felt like I figured it out. And then I got older, and then it changed the dynamic because of aging.
Don't blame, no, that's like the worst thing. Don't blame the aging process. That's my pet peeve.
I was doing great.
Say that differently.
Okay, I won't blame aging, but I will tell you.
Things change.
Things change, and I did not change with the change.
Yes.
I did not change. My body was changing, and I did not make adjustments. And I think the biggest adjustment was just more protein and more fuel. I think a lot of keto adapted athletes have a proteinophobia, and don't be afraid of the protein.
Well, I think especially female athletes definitely need to eat more protein, and female athletes need to lift more strength training as all endurance athletes, because you got to balance that catabolic and anabolic, because we're breaking ourselves down so much doing this long distance endurance. So if you're not adding lots of protein into your food plan and doing strength training 2-3 times a week, I think you have to really look at what you're doing for performance and longevity benefits. So it's something,
and I think really like time under tension. I don't know if you do a lot with time under tension, but I'm a fan of time under tension training.
Yeah, I haven't gotten into that. I'm just setting up trying to get a new routine with the fall weather and my outdoor gym and not having a gym. I have a blog to write today about the new different podcasts to go into on sleep and the importance of sleep for recovery and repair, but also this new life since COVID and since I moved from Seattle. I don't have, clients at 6 a.m. to go train, and I don't go to the gym at 5 a.m. So now it's like waiting for an hour in the morning, sitting there reading, waiting for the sun to come up so I can go work out because it's such a new world for myself and my own schedule. But training wintertime and being able to get the strength training when you don't go to gym anymore and creating your own home gym is something we should dive into for another show.
I just got, Dr. Nally is my doctor, and I just
he's a
got
chiropractor, isn't he? Is he not
he's a
medical doctor? I couldn't figure that out.
Doctor osteopath. And he's covered under my insurance, which makes him even better. It was like, because I've seen naturopath doctors, and which I like my naturopath doctor, but Dr. Nally's written books on keto, which is nice. And he can understand my my issues for one, keto, but also like problems with insulin resistance and not adding enough protein. I think that it's so hard for keto people, there's like two different camps. There's endurance athletes who are trying to embrace low carb or fat adaptation. And then there's keto people who are trying to embrace endurance or sports training. And there's so much confusing information, for one, because there's paradigms, like the keto people are so afraid to add any carbs or use any carbs or add more protein. I mean, because they've been told things that match somebody who's not training. And then the endurance athletes to embrace, like, I need carbs all the time. And I even think those people have a problem with protein. But so Dr. Nally recommended, I'll show you the box, the X3. I don't know if you've heard of this.
Oh, that one. Huh.
Yeah, so it was pricey for a little bar with bands and everything, but it works pretty good. He thinks that it will help increase my testosterone, because that's a problem. I'm like, I can't take testosterone because it's a banned substance. Like, that would be bad, being a cycling triathlon coach and getting popped for banned substance. That would be very embarrassing. I was like, absolutely no, I cannot take that. But he's like, do this, and it's basically time under tension with bands.
Hmm.
And the workouts are pretty good. I stopped doing them before my race. And then after my race, I got a cough, a cold, I think a little bit of bronchitis. And I haven't done much afterwards because I was like, I just got to sleep and recover. And I did recover. I'm well now. Yay. Although my husband made me get a COVID test. He didn't make me. He was like, get a COVID test. I think you have COVID because you're coughing all the time. I'm like, it's not COVID. It's just because I breathed hard and I have damage to my lungs from being born premature. Anytime I do something hard and not being trained for it, that nice combo, it gives me some issues. But I'm all better now, and I'm going deer hunting with my son on Thursday. So I'm going to start back at training next week.
Yeah. That's what's so loud. So I know I got to wrap up and get to my paying job. Not the fun job.
That's always good. I have to say, if you are not looking at Debbie, you look fabulous.
Oh, well, thank you.
I feel like your face is glowing and you look great. California has a good look on you.
Oh, thank you. It's hard. It's freezing cold, right now. It's end of October and it's been 100 degrees and suddenly it went to 40 degrees overnight and it heats up to 80 here. I got to adjust to the nighttime lows and not think it's 80 degrees all day. So I've got my pashmina wrap and I've been shivering because I'm working on my cold thermogenesis at my house. And swimming outside, it's so nice to swim outside, but I asked the guys yesterday, I said, how do you guys do this all winter long? So I guess it's, it stays in the 60s, but when you acclimatize to like you in Arizona, that 90 degrees, 100 degrees feels good. That 67 is cold.
It was 80 degrees 2 days ago. It's been cold here too. There's a cold snap that came through and I was like, oh my goodness. I
know. I was in Palm Springs, Palm Desert for my dad's birthday on the weekend. Now they're just an hour and 45 minutes away. I can visit them and it's like, oh, it's be nice and warm there. And it was only 72 there, but it was 97 the other day. So I'm hoping this extended summer will continue. But yeah, so it is great living here and just more this new schedule as I've been trying to blog and I'll start podcasting a little more about it. But it's just, as I was saying, the journey that we have, the gift from COVID that I'm not racing first thing in the morning at 4:30, getting up and going to the gym at 5. It's just I haven't been able to, go to gyms since I moved here because we don't have one anymore. But it's just this complete change in, I think, a lot of our lifestyles. And I think it's a great thing. You just have
I agree. I think it's good that people slow down. Although I have to say, during all of COVID, I was waking up at 4:30, but that's just because we're trying to beat the heat here in Phoenix.
Summer.
Yeah, and now I'm sleeping into 5:30. And I was like,
me too. 5:30. I'm like, can I just wake up? And then we do yoga, and then we'll go work out at 7 when the sun comes up. But we'll do a half an hour yoga in our bedroom and then go work out. But it is different not having the gym. And once the prices eventually come down for kettlebells, I'd like some heavy weights to work out because I'm missing my heavy lifting. So anyways, it was good catching up with you and we'll hopefully do a little more podcasting and do Fitness Fridays.
It's always fun to talk to you. And I think it's important to get out the word, not only for fat adapted endurance athletes, but adapted women endurance athletes to help them have optimal health because there's a lot of different puzzle pieces going on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and Dr. Stacy Sims' book, Roar, you can take, stuff of that. She's not low carb, but looking at the timing of your cycle and all that, it's important.
Yeah, I have that book somewhere. I've read a little bit of it, but I was because she was gonna be a speaker at the conference, but I didn't end up going to. But
well, we'll dive into that more next time. So if you guys have any questions for Stephanie or myself, just let me know and we'll put all the links in the show notes when we remember what we forgot. And you can find Stephanie on her Keto Endurance group page on Facebook and podcast and on Instagram. So thank you, Stephanie.
You're welcome. Thanks, Debbie.